a very fine officer in the finest tradition of the Jamaica Defence Force. We're taking steps to ensure that this brigade is appropriately equipped despite the high cost of the tools utilized. To strengthen this to force capacity, we had a maritime, within the Jamaican Maritime Zone, one maritime patrol aircraft was acquired. It's a costly piece of equipment, but it's already proved its value. I think only a couple of weeks ago, a large shipment of illegal drugs, cocaine, was intercepted going to Cayman, and I see Mr. Bush was here. That single shipment was almost as valuable as the plane. Very major activity. JDF also acquired additional helicopters, which is crucial not only intercepting and protecting our coastline, but in supporting the police, in disaster relief, in search and rescue, and intercepting the island. Bear in mind, search and rescue is a national responsibility as we pursue an economy in which tourism in particular has played a very significant role. The Coast Guard, Mr. Speaker, is the police of the maritime space. The government has demonstrated its commitment in tackling corruption through the passing of the Integrity Commission Act in 2018. Mr. Speaker, we take credit for the establishment of the major organized crime and anti-corruption agency as an independent statutory law enforcement agency. MOCA will be made fully operational within the passing of the regulation, which will be tabled in the order boards by the end of this month. All right, to effect the provisions of the Act, I agreed, and I'll be having further discussion with my counterpart to ensure that all the regulations are in place to set the beautifully establish them and get MOCA running. MOCA will therefore be able to function autonomously. MOCA will bring new energy, will receive the fiscal and legislative support from this government to dismantle the criminal gangs that utilize all sectors of business, public and private resources to undermine our social institutions and profit from the gains of illicit activity. Mr. Speaker, we are going there without fear or favor. We'll aggressively pursue ruthless crimes as we seek to disrupt organized criminal networks that corrupt our institutions. MOCA will ensure that corruption has no place in the new Jamaica. This is our FBI. There are a couple of agencies, Mr. Speaker, that play a critical role. PICA, for example, Passport Immigration and Citizenship Agency, is always seen purely in terms of acquiring a passport. But they play an extremely critical role in border security. And they have established a requisite relationship with Interpol, regional bodies, and of course utilize the advanced passenger information system effectively to ensure that we keep out those who are undesirable while welcoming our visitors to the shore. PICA, in fact, has invested in automation at both Norman Manley and Montego Bay, and I can give them credit. Christmas Eve this year, last year, I think they cleared over 12,000 passengers in a single day at the Montego Bay Airport, and this was The Firearm Licensing Authority must be given some prominence because they are now required to ensure we have a properly regulated firearms industry. There is an increasing sporting fraternity, which itself presents some economic prospects. And to ensure we have the regulations and the management system in place to take advantage of this growing opportunity, FLA is the required agency. We must ensure that those who are not fit and proper to manage lethal weapons do not receive firearms. There must be effective screening for both mental fitness and physical acuity. At the same time, those businesses for whom firearms are chief tools of trade must be properly monitored to ensure that there is no unauthorized movement of weapons or ammunition into illegal activities. All action to prevent this must be in place. The FLA will continue to play a critical role in ensuring that these activities remain strictly within the law. Mr. Speaker, all law enforcement efforts must have a strong suite of legislation that is effectively implemented. Along with the MOCA regulations mentioned earlier, the following legislation will be brought to this Parliament during the course of this year. The amendments to the Process of Crime Act will be here very soon, before May, I think, under the requirement. The Firearms Act, the Immigration Restriction Commonwealth Citizens Act, Aliens Act, and by the end of the year, the long-spoken of JCF Act will come to the House. The review of the Criminal Justice Suppression of Criminal Organization Act, more popularly referred to as the anti-gang legislation, is underway and will continue with urgency. This year, we'll seek to ensure the merger of the Police Civilian Oversight Authority and the Police Services Commission, which have been talked about for a decade, to create one oversight body mandated to monitor and evaluate the operative force. This legislation is expected to bring in the course of this year. We have had discussion with all the players, and I think I'm getting to a point where we can, in fact, give a timetable and bring this piece of legislation to the House. It is, in fact, an amendment to our Constitution, and therefore has to be handled a particular way and with particular sensitivity and with competence. Mr. Speaker, I've demonstrated quite clearly our commitment to strategic investment in our security architecture. I believe it was necessary to show the country a strategic allocation of large capital investment we'll undertake this year, especially the expenditure to bring our police force up to the required standards to ensure we can have an efficient force. We will not allow the systems, processes, and facilities to deteriorate. This government will ensure our officers can execute their mission with effectiveness. We have a good team. We have to give them the tools, and they'll do it. Mr. Speaker, I will end on 2 short notes. I think I can do it in 8 minutes. Right? All governments have undertaken substantial social intervention programs throughout the country. This year we will continue to strengthen our security architecture and capabilities, but so too shall we continue to strengthen our efforts of crime prevention through social intervention and socio-economic development. Much of these agencies now are concentrated in the Office of the Prime Minister in order to reduce the bureaucracy and the amount of money spent on staffing and bureaucracy rather than reaching the people to whom they should get to. What we have established, however, Mr. Speaker, sustainability of social intervention rests heavily on our ability as a government, supported by the people, to effect positive changes through employment and professional deployment. And success depends on having a foundation of security. It is for this reason that the zones of special operation has been brought into place. It places security at the core from which to build our social intervention in several vulnerable communities where ZOZOs were operationalized. As a result of enhanced security measures, social intervention programs were successfully executed, and we see safety and peace return to those communities. And we cannot only think of intervention as those specific projects. We have to look at the entire social infrastructure. A community with a quality school can be as important as any kind of school. In fact, it's the most valuable intervention in a vulnerable community. I've seen this work in the community of Glenavon, which was once one of our most challenging communities. But after not only providing the basic services, physical improvement in the school, providing uniforms, the teachers interviewed some innovative techniques like separating the boys from the girls in the early stages, ensuring the boys, who were always the ones who were being left behind, have proper uniforms, get breakfast and lunch. We introduced music, sports, and a computer lab. From a base of 40% numeracy at grade 4, in 3 years, all the boys and the girls, of course, were placed in school, high school during the last year. House Leader, you have to give me extra 5 minutes. Another example of a commitment to meaningful social intervention is the recent launch of the simulation equipment for heavy-duty machine operation at the Caribbean Maritime Institute. This partnership seeks to for inner-city young men. The current facility at CMU has 91 students from downtown Kingston, including 1 girl. But this is an area where they are particularly interested, and the males are particularly interested, and we can divert them from gang activity. They are trained to operate heavy-duty equipment, industrial maintenance, mechatronics, and of course some principles of food preparation, areas in which they can find productive, good-paying jobs and will therefore turn from gangster to productive work. We'll collaborate with Hope. They will take all of them, and we are collaborating to work with Hope and Heart and the JDF to place a similar piece of equipment in Western Jamaica and provide additional training for such individuals. Unfortunately, too many of our opinion leaders do not examine what is happening in our communities. They don't live there, and they only take note when the blood spills over. Right. We want to change the narrative and want to get our business more inclusive, to understand what is to be done and what is being done and how they can cooperate. So it is on this basis, Speaker, I say it is true. Our government has spent a lot of money in social intervention. City Security and Justice Program, Social Events, Jamaica Social Investment Fund, Peace Management Initiative, international partners have contributed, but the critical that we did not put in the security foundation. That's what this government is doing at this point in time. Sustainable socio-economic change cannot be maintained unless we have a secure foundation. This is the government's, the Jamaica Labour Party, led by Andrew Michael Holmes, is committed to ensuring that we change this trend. The initiatives include, in many of these communities, training, physical improvement to roads, upgraded social services, cultural activities, and many other. The Ministry of National Security will be playing a role to ensure that we can lead the change in these communities and ensure we get sustainable response and sustainable change, behavior change. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to give a rehab of some of the activity done in one community, in the parish of St. James. I'm doing this primarily to show that much time is spent investing in the communities. We did not get the required outcome because we did not have the required security foundation. We are now taking steps to correct that. You can see old road tracks being converted to paved roads. What we are now doing is ensuring with ZOZO and other security investment in our security infrastructure is to change that. Again, another road, this was called Blood Lane once. You can see a highway at this point in time. And we will not invest in just meaningless conversation with gangsters, as some advocate, or pay social intervention monies to call for peace conference. I do not negotiate peace conference between gangs. This is not a civil strife. This is the Glendevon Community Center, which is where we are doing training, and you can see them coming in, hotel services being offered. At one time closed, unfortunately, but now fully open and operational. We're investing in our people. We are providing alternative opportunities. Plant a center of excellence. We work towards the greater good of this country. Before concluding, Mr. Speaker, I must speak briefly to the state of public emergency. We had a state of emergency in St. James, St. Catherine, North Police Division, and the Kingston Metropolitan Region. Unfortunately, there has been some disagreement on the interpretation of the SOE by our colleagues on that side. Mr. Speaker, the government cannot discard this very valuable and effective tool. But I'd like to indicate that we have come away far away concerning the conduct of such activity by our security forces. It is important to note at the end of the state of emergency in St. James and the corporate area and St. Catherine, there was no single major charge of extrajudicial execution. None. The only deaths in St. James took place in combat, where men with high-powered weapons engaged the police. Let me point out, therefore, Mr. Speaker, this JLP has no government amended the Emergency Powers Act to ensure that the opposition had a right to veto. We have no interest in creating a system of authoritarian activity that denies our citizens their rights. In particular, disrespect for our young men. I feel very strongly, as I've indicated, my commitment is providing young men in particular with an alternative and a path to personal development through relevant curricula that are critical to reducing violence in this country. We have a homicide rate of 47 per 100,000, Mr. Speaker. That is a national crisis requiring special activity. It is beyond the capacity of normal policing. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to use a motion graphic presentation to show the investment of our country, how we are operating. This will take about 3 minutes. I'd like to show this motion graphic how we intend to attack the gangs, the dons, and the facilitators, to remove the killers from our communities and provide a community that is safe and secure. Mr. Speaker, this country has endured too many years caught in a vicious cycle of crime and violence that eats away at our economic potential and undermine our institutions. We're going to have a stride of interception. To the left, I am looking at it from this way, you will see major investment in the security apparatus. Police, army, MOCA, customs, wherever it is. And to the far right, from where I'm sitting, you see another investment in social intervention, improvement in physical infrastructure, housing, education, training, all is required to offer productive opportunity. But Mr. Speaker, at a level of 48 approximate per 100,000 murders, we need the middle section, some suppressive activity to reduce the killing of Jamaicans, to save the lives of Jamaicans. We have to get to a more acceptable level. That triad of activity is required to destroy the monster of crime that is damaging our society and damaging the image of Jamaica. All three activities, Mr. Speaker, are required to take it to another level where we can now look at a virtuous cycle for peace and prosperity. I've taken forth, Mr. Speaker, not even the 2020 vision. In the Caribbean and Latin America, it is viewed as 16 per 100 average. We have the men. If we make the investment and pursue the activity aggressively, honestly, we can get to that level. But we need all three levels of activity. We need all three levels of activity to create this virtuous cycle of peace and prosperity where there is reduced crime, increased government revenues from increased production, right? Economic growth, and of course, by increased revenues, increased investment in security and social infrastructure to create a genuine, prosperous society. That is the mission of the Andrew Holness-led government of the Jamaican Liberal Party. Mr. Speaker, all is embodied in Plan Secure Jamaica, led by the Prime Minister. This will be operationalized using the tripartite approach, coming together to bear down on the monster of crime over time. Over time, with this all of the government approach, the need for strong suppression will decrease and will arrive at the virtuous cycle. Mr. Speaker, securing our peace and safety is the objective of the Ministry of National Security. Under the government of Prime Minister Andrew Holness, we will secure and defend the peace of our people and play our part in creating the foundation for sustainable development for the new Jamaica. This country, as stated on the 2030 plan, will indeed be the place where all Jamaicans will want to live, work, raise their families, and do business in peace and safety. May God bless you all, and may God bless our work.
Order, please. Mr. Paulwell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The member spoke about my attire today, but he used to know that I'm going to start my afro next. Going back. Mr. Speaker, I begin my contribution with thanks to the Almighty for health, for strength, to continue serving my constituency and our beloved country, Jamaica. I especially thank my constituents who continue to give me their love and unfailing support. I want to single out my two hard-working councillors, Lorraine Dobson and Jacqueline Lewis, who are here. Despite challenges, we continue to achieve significant developments in infrastructure, education and training, entrepreneurship, employment, healthcare, care for the less fortunate, and other interventions that impact the lives and welfare of our constituents. These positive achievements, Mr. Speaker, have been made possible through the hard work and dedication of my faithful and committed constituency executive and the task force. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you, the Deputy Speaker, the clerk and the hard-working staff of this Parliament, as well as all my parliamentary colleagues on both sides for the work we continue to do together. My special gratitude to the President of our great party and Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Peter Phillips. You continue to inspire and keep us focused on our mission to ensure we have policies and programs that will keep us steadfast in our covenant to build a Jamaica that works for all our people. Special thanks to my family members and close friends who continue to assist me, especially during the twists and turns of this political life. You have helped to keep me grounded and steadfast. And of course, to my personal staff, my special assistant, my security and driver. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I want to start my presentation by recognizing that last year, this House failed to schedule the usual constituency debate. So I'll take a few minutes to raise two matters of great concern to me and my constituents. Let's start firstly with the Windward Road Improvement Project. I wish to place on record our dissatisfaction with the road improvement being undertaken along a section of Windward Road in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, before we demitted office in 2016, plans for the development of an elegant corridor from the Norman Manley Airport into the city were in an advanced stage. The project was to commence initially with a major focus on the Windward Road for full rehabilitation from Rockfort to Ellison Road. This would have seen upgrading of the pavements, construction of curb walls and sidewalks, installation of new lighting and signage, and a general beautification of the area. This was also to include members from Eastern St. Andrew, Mountain View Avenue, and of course my colleague from Southeast St. Andrew. To our amazement, the project has been downsized with only road improvements surfacing from Rockfort to Mountain View Avenue intersection. In fact, the contract that was signed did not even have provisions for curb walls and sidewalks. This was partly remedied only after my strenuous appeals to the Prime Minister. So while curb walls are now being installed, there is still no provision for sidewalks, despite assurances from the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are not envious of the improvements currently taking place in Barbican and Constant Spring, but we must ask, why are the people of downtown being treated differently than those uptown? When you continue to operate in this way, Mr. Speaker, you only cement the widely held view that there is classism in this place. So I call on the Prime Minister, under whose portfolio the National Works Agency falls, for the full restoration of the original plans for this project. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to the second item, that of the Port Royal development. When we speak of strategic integrated development, we mean that development should be inclusive. The proposed development of Port Royal, including the cruise ship port, is a case in point. As you may be aware, Mr. Speaker, there have been many proposals to capitalize on the potential of Port Royal. Given its historical, ecological, and environmental importance, as well as other social and economic factors, successive governments have moved very carefully with implementing plans to exploit the value of this national asset. In addition, it was recognized that the residents of the community must be an integral part of any development. So while we welcome the latest initiative by the Port Authority of Jamaica to develop Port Royal as a tourist resort, we urge the authorities to proceed in a more consultative manner. We are very concerned that much is swirling about the project and things are happening which might prove to be premature and another waste of effort and money. We support the role being played by the government's regulatory entities concerned with the cultural and natural resources, as well as the planning and development. However, Mr. Speaker, a greater effort must be made to involve the people's representatives and broad-based stakeholders' interests, including residents, youth, and the local business community. What about those early pioneers in the Port Royal Development Company, led by Bobby Stevens, who had done so much work in the developmental aspect of this project, at great cost to themselves and to the government? Why is this project being developed in such secrecy? Over the years, under successive administrations, the citizens of the area have had to contend with inadequate housing, water, and sewage problems, and other challenges. Because the development plans were in a state of appropriate and permanent solutions were often delayed. Now that the cruise shipping and other tourism potential are being realized, we must not leave the people behind. First, we need to fix the housing situation, we need to fix the water, we need to fix the sewage problem. Then we need to enter consultations with respect to training, entrepreneurship, and the necessary social and economic adjustment that residents need to make. We also have to focus on the reorientation of the people, which will be required for seamless integration into development as partners, beneficiaries, and key stakeholders. So, Mr. Speaker, it is not too late to involve the Port Royalists in this venture. Our people must not be left behind in the process of development. We must safeguard the people's interest. So I turn now to the portfolio responsibility. So I will focus, Mr. Speaker, on mining and energy. Two sectors are critical to sustainable national development. Despite encouraging developments in the mining sector, we believe that it remains fragile, while the energy sector has been mired in scandals, adverse scrutiny, and uncertainty. The state of affairs in the mining sector calls for proactive intervention, while in the energy sector, the situation requires serious attention and greater accountability. Mr. Speaker, the concept of energy as the lifeblood of the Jamaican economy has been embraced by successive administrations. Jamaica's sustainable development, economic competitiveness, and the quality of life of our people depend on access to affordable energy. During our time and my time as minister, we pursued an energy policy that positioned the sector on a secure and sustainable development trajectory. The promulgation and implementation of our policies were transparent, the process collaborative, and the implementation inclusive. The national interest was paramount, and as far as possible, stakeholder participation was our preferred practice. Our collective mission was purposeful, our effort strategic, and our vision focused. We are about the country's business, and national development spurred by affordable energy was our sole objective. So, Mr. Speaker, the member from St. Andrew Eastern has been appointed Minister of Science, Energy, and Technology during perhaps the most tumultuous period in our energy sector. She has a tough task ahead, as I wish her, and she knows I wish her all the best in her assignment. However, as I did with her predecessor, which fell on deaf ears, I asked her with this Parliament nation as witness, please restore the National Energy Council. Avail yourself of the invaluable support that they gave me, the ministry, and the energy sector. Mr. Speaker, I deliberately engaged stakeholder representatives, including the then opposition, in regular consultation. To facilitate this constructive engagement, we established a National Energy Council and held quarterly meetings to accommodate feedback, review developments, set targets, promulgate policies and programs, and ensure the timely and seamless implementation. Programs that benefited from these regular consultations include our debate implementation of our energy diversification program, modernizing Jamaica's electricity sector, promotion of renewables, conservation, divestment of energy assets, oil and gas exploration, the petroleum trade, among so many other things. We discussed, we resolved these in this atmosphere of openness. The collaborative process worked. Constructive engagement proved beneficial. In addition, the Council provided, Madam Minister, a critical oversight and contributed to transparency, probity, and the smooth implementation of public policies. Mr. Speaker, we must move to complete the energy transformation that we started. Those times we implemented game-changing developments and we gave momentum to the speed and magnitude of investments in renewables and modernizing the generation of electricity. Madam Minister, not much has happened by way of new initiatives since 2016. That momentum has slowed significantly because of misguided policies, mismanagement and bungling. For the country to regain the momentum, the current administration must become far more proactive and inclusive. It has to change the haphazard way the portfolio has been managed over the last 3 years. And it must also commit to ensuring that the benefits being realized from the efforts of the last administration are distributed to the people. So I want to start firstly by noting the significant achievement that was made with the introduction of liquefied natural gas as part of the preferred fuel for the generation of electricity. It was at a price, Mr. Speaker, and with condition to spur positive development in our energy sector. Our goal was to ensure that once the economies of scale kicked in, smaller enterprises and institutions would be motivated to access LNG. The introduction of LNG into Jamaica's energy mix has already opened up prospects for numerous local entities. The construction of the new 190 megawatt combined cycle plant at JPSCO Old Harbour now at an advanced stage. A cogeneration plant offering 94 megawatts of baseload capacity to the national grid is being constructed at the Jamaica plant in Clarendon. While the University of the West Indies is moving apace with its LNG project, and now we know Red Stripe is reaping the benefits of that process. In fact, Jamaica's energy policy identified natural gas to be an alternative fuel to heavy fuel oil, which at that time when we started this venture was about 80% of the generated electricity of the country. The policy established that natural gas would make up 26% of Jamaica's total energy supply by 2020 and 42% by 2030. We are overperforming in that regard due to the work done by the previous administration. Mr. Speaker, the potential for LNG use in Jamaica is huge, but the government now needs to promulgate the appropriate guidelines and regulations to facilitate improvement in the sector. The guidelines and regulations must encourage competition and not a monopoly in the provision of LNG. Competition will lead to new investments, resulting in better prices for the consumer and a more robust industry for the country. Importantly, any regulation or new law must ensure that the Jamaican consumer benefits directly from the use of cheaper LNG for generating electricity. The consumer must not be used to subsidize the cost of the infrastructure for LNG for other providers for the hub, which really they are not going to be benefiting from. With the introduction of LNG for electricity, we wish to emphasize that the gas must continue to be regarded as the pass-through fuel in calculating the cost of electricity. We had established a benchmark price, 12.89 US cents per kilowatt hour. However, we believe that the Jamaican consumer must benefit from any LNG cost savings that come their way. So while you have 12.89 cents as the flooring or ceiling, you should be able to go lower than that based on throughput, additional demand, and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, the government must know, and today I have tabled certain questions in Parliament because we want to ensure that that ceiling that was established of 12.89 cents, that we are not going above it, that represents the minimum price at which the electricity sold from LNG would be sold to the grid. The people have a right to know, so we've asked the question, and we expect that we'll get those answers, especially in relation to the power purchase agreements that have been signed by JPSCO. Mr. Speaker, the efforts we made to diversify energy was to ensure that we protect the people, especially the poor and vulnerable. Our guiding principle as a party is that no one should be left behind in the process of development. Jamaicans must enjoy the benefits that flow from that process. As a right, every Jamaican must have access to affordable electricity. No one should be left in the dark. This is why we broaden the mandate of the Rural Electrification Program, REP, and change its name to National Energy Solutions Limited, now infamously referred to as NESOL. We mandated the new company to provide electricity to those far removed from the national grid by utilizing renewable sources of energy, especially solar, wind, and biomass. Mr. Speaker, one study showed in 2015 that we had achieved 97.5% of the island covered with electricity, but that the remaining 2.5% would require the expenditure of over $9 billion using the traditional means. So the expanded mandate of the agency was designed to achieve 100% so that everybody could get electricity, because we wanted to safeguard the interests of our people. Mr. Speaker, in the middle of the recent scandal affecting this agency, it was arbitrarily closed. Instead of punishing those who sought to enrich themselves through corrupt means, the poor are now left in the dark. They are paying the price for the misdeeds of others. And so we need to ask the question, how will these functions of NESOL be managed now that the agency
Point of order,
closed
Mr. Speaker. Point of order. The member said that NESOL was arbitrarily closed. The member knows, and it was announced, that NESOL would be absorbed back into the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, and that the functions would be done out of the ministry. So he is misleading the Parliament when he says that it's been arbitrarily closed.
Mr. Speaker, one day the agency was here, we were pursuing investigations, and the next day the Prime Minister announced the closure of the agency without giving us any details as to what is going to happen. That is arbitrariness, Mr. Speaker. As a matter of fact. Mr. Speaker, I want to move quickly now to the matter of streetlights. So while I am happy with the clearing of the streetlights arrears, I am concerned again with the lack of information on the implementation of the project to lower the bill for streetlights. In 2015, I signed the amendment to the JPSCO license to replace the 105,000 streetlights across Jamaica with energy-saving LED lamps over a 3-year period. It was the expectation that with the full rollout of the program, the yearly streetlight bill of some $2.8 billion would be cut by at least a half to about $1.4 billion. The agreement stipulated that in order to ensure that the taxpayer is not billed for streetlights that are not working, the new lights will be run on a system that would indicate when the lights are not working. We are trying to protect our people. While we continue to get reports of malfunctioning streetlights and of LED lamps, we need to get more details and proper accounting of the electricity being consumed and regular updates of the savings being achieved. Mr. Speaker, again, I have tabled certain questions in the House today to enable us to get that information. We want to know that the project as developed by us in 2015, as was the basis for the amendment to the JPSCO license, which should result in 50% reduction in the price of streetlights, those benefits are passed through to the consumers, and this is done now. Mr. Speaker, I don't often do this, but I want to commend the Jamaica Public Service Company, because there does appear to be an improvement in their customer service and relations in recent time. In fact, the reports that other utilities are outperforming them in the negative sense. I must commend them for responding to my criticisms of last year by way of enabling the citizens of Windward Courts, Borough Banks. I mentioned last year that they had agreed to provide them with service. they had agreed to do the infrastructure and the technology for enabling the service, but that was not done. I'm so happy and proud and pleased to announce that that has been put in place, and my people now are regular rate-paying, metered customers of the Jamaica Public Service Company, and I want to commend that. And in fact, they are using both prepaid and postpaid system in the community. They no longer run and hide when they see the JPS and police coming anymore. The people are accepting their responsibility, and this is one of the surest ways to reduce the theft of electricity. Mr. Speaker, in relation to renewable energy, again, Madam Minister, nothing much has happened since when at that time Jamaica was leading the English-speaking Caribbean in the number of projects that were completed or being implemented. The pioneering work that we did with the establishment and expansion of Wigton Wind Farm is a shining testimony of how a government enterprise can be conceived, can be established, can be properly run with full transparency and not ready for divestment. We created that. We are equally proud of the other renewable projects, such as the BMR wind farm in St. Elizabeth, the WRB solar farm in Clarendon, and the Magoti hydroelectric expansion, again in St. Elizabeth. We are also proud of the net billing policy, which saw over 300 licenses being granted. The 8 Rivers Energy Company's 37 megawatt project, which is being constructed now, was a part of the allocation that was made when I was minister. We had also completed 10 feasibility studies on our rivers for possible hydroelectric projects. These need now to be dusted off, Madam Minister, and for them to be implemented. We need to see some new initiatives. We need to protect the interests of our people. I had done a section on Wigton, but earlier on I presented most of those salient points, so I will not repeat them, but just to say that those funds that you are getting, well, sir, the minister knows that I like her very much. She knows that I have promised to assist in her defeat in Eastern St. Andrew, and I'm committed to that. But I really want to work to ensure that this ministry that has gone through so much hell can be uplifted once more. And so I pledge my support to work with her. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to speak briefly about Petrojam. It is with a great sense of sadness that I speak about what has happened at Petrojam, from the fraudulent actions by some in management to the callous way in which we have treated Venezuela, which has always been a great friend to Jamaica. The action by the government of Jamaica to acquire Venezuela's 49% stake in the plant are seen as mean-spirited and opportunistic. It is to be noted that the Venezuelans themselves had conducted their own review and audit of Petrojam refinery and came back with many adverse findings. Mr. Speaker, let us not forget that it was the Venezuelan government that bailed us out in the hour of need through the Petro-Carib arrangement and through the debt buyback with a 50% discount. Yet when they needed our support and understanding, they were rejected by this government. How could a Jamaican government burn bad lamp for one of our nearest and dearest friends? Mr. Speaker, we wish and hope that the Venezuelans will rise again soon, and that for the sake of our country, the mistakes of this government will not permanently damage our friendship. There is great uncertainty about the future of Petrojam. We await the ZACA report. Now we have been told that it's going to be in June rather than May. Again, Mr. Speaker, in the absence of an Energy Council, I would like to see that report being subject to the scrutiny of this Parliament, and perhaps the committee to start doing that is the Economy and Production Committee. In the meanwhile, we await the outcome of the various investigations being done at both Petrojam and Nestle, and we again say, let the chips fall where they may. Minister, as an aside, I have noticed that since you have assumed the office, nothing much has changed. And I'm speaking particularly about the composition of the boards in your ministry. And I really believe that you are well advised, because those boards now report to you, and you are now answerable. I want to suggest, Madam Minister, that you look at the PCJ board. Because whatever they do since your appointment, it is done through you and in your name. Today, I have asked certain questions in relation to the award of a particular contract, and also about the level of sponsorship and donations that the PCJ has been doing. There are more questions that will follow, including, Madam Minister, the role of the HR department at PCJ. Madam Minister, it does not give me much pleasure, a lot of pleasure, to raise these issues, because, you know, in the end, the people who are affected most by negative publicity are your staff members, who have nothing to do with the appointment of boards and some of these issues that occur. But I am duty-bound to raise them. And so, over the next couple of weeks, I will be tabling questions in relation to the work and matters that we have seen emerging at PCJ. And in that regard, Madam Minister, I would like to suggest, in 2012, when I became Minister again for that sector, I gathered all of my directors and got them to sit down with the OCG office to go through a process of learning as to how to operate using good governance as a guiding principle. And I would like to suggest that to you as a way to go, using the Integrity Committee to organize seminars. They did it for me, they'll do it for you. Madam Minister, the directors ought to know that where there is likely to be a conflict of interest, or where there is in fact a conflict of interest, such conflicts must be disclosed, and directors ought to recuse themselves in any decision regarding such possible conflicts. And frankly, I see nothing wrong with members of political parties and their affiliates working in government, but they ought to learn and understand the rules and debunk this attitude of entitlement. They must abide by the process for recruitment and employment of everyone else. And where persons are conflicted by a personal relationship with others, this must be disclosed, and they recuse themselves from involving in the recruitment of such persons in the organization. And as I mentioned, more anon. I wanted to say a few words about the matter of oil and gas exploration, but I see the time is running out of me, and I need to use my next portion to focus on the mining sector, and so I will leave that until we are able to speak more fulsomely on it.
House Leader.
Now, Mr. Speaker, how much time?
Same as him. 15 minutes and I'm done. 15 minutes and I'm done.
Equal opportunity.
Within 15 minutes. I move that the member's time be extended.
Sufficient to finish.
For 15 minutes, as long as it does not exceed that amount of time.
Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Mr. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, I will now turn to the mining section. A major priority of the ministry during our tenure was the promulgation of a comprehensive plan to fully develop and expand the country's mineral sector. The National Minerals Policy was created and crafted to achieve this framework of attracting investments in the industrial and metallic mineral sector, including prospecting for gold and copper, as well as the exploitation of Jamaica's significant limestone potential. Mr. Speaker, Jamaica has in excess of 250 billion tons of mineable limestone of varying qualities. Our plans included a focus on expanding the sector's value-added possibilities, and focus was placed on the manufacturing of lime, hydrated lime, cement, grout, thinset, and so on. The policy was left in an advanced stage of development, which was designed to provide bankable information and incentives that can facilitate growth within the mineral sector. And again, Minister of Mining. No, mining. Sometimes I'm not too sure who it is, but my friend, the Minister of Mining. I urge the Minister to implement that policy again in a strategic and coordinated manner. The establishment of a National Minerals Council may be a good place to begin. A body that comprises major stakeholders, your community people, the environmentalists, and those who are involved in the business. I think this is the best practice route to achieving, especially in these sectors that are difficult, consensus and a vision that will involve everybody. Mr. Speaker, in relation to the bauxite alumina sector, I think it remains positive despite, again, the challenges. The future looks promising based on the growing global demand. Aluminum price on the London Metal Exchange remains favorable, and global demand for aluminum is projected to increase. So again, we have to say it is therefore quite alarming that Jamaica is foregoing the levy at the very point when we should be prepared to reap the benefits flowing from the decisive actions that we took as a government. We are adamant that this diminishing resource must be managed in the best interest of the Jamaican people. For the record, I want to re-emphasize the promise made by the Leader of the Opposition to reverse the policy of expanding the bauxite reserves of companies that have no intention to process alumina in Jamaica. We need to ensure that greater value is added right here in Jamaica. Our strategic vision for the industry is clearly stated and is underpinned by our desire for responsible operations and the strictest adherence to national and international mining practices. This includes environmental protection and pollution control, reforestation, issues relating to compensation when accidents occur, appropriate resettlement of affected individuals. We must protect the people. Mr. Speaker, when UC Rosal failed to fulfill its obligations, operational obligations at Alpart, we were relentless in forcing them to restart the plant or sell to an entity that would do so. The company eventually decided to sell after immense pressure from us. We didn't just sit and watch, and we insisted that the negotiations for the sale be expedited and intervene when talks were faltering. So today, Mr. Speaker, I'm so proud that Alpart is open and shining again. I'm pleased to see renewed life and energy in the towns, such as Nain, surrounding the plant. I am proud of the growing levels of employment and the many corporate contributions to the community. I'm happy for the sharing of technology and training of Jamaicans at Chinese universities. We went and we saw them. GISCO is indeed making a difference to the Jamaican economy. And as the opposition spokesman on finance told us in this House in March, I quote, the Planning Institute of Jamaica attributes half of the 1.8% growth this year to a single private sector project. So without GISCO, Alpart, growth this year would have been under 1% despite all the other projects that are going on. This government is reaping the fruits from the orchards planted by us. And there are other orchards as well, the infrastructure, the roads, the hotels, the LNG, and the logistics hub, just to name a few. So, Mr. Speaker, we are pleased that GISCO has honored this commitment, and I wish them well. We're looking forward to the expansion of the refinery and the installation of new energy system. And I want to pause to pay tribute to the outgoing chairman of GISCO, Chairman Chen, and to welcome the new chairman as he takes over the operations of this significant company. He's taken over at a time when there are some important issues in the community that need to be addressed urgently. I will be visiting the area tomorrow. I'm going to be in your constituency tomorrow, Mr. Speaker, to meet with residents who have been complaining of pollution and other issues affecting their well-being. I intend to make representation on their behalf to GISCO for these issues to be dealt with in a timely manner and to facilitate ongoing dialogue with the various stakeholders. We must protect the people's interests. Mr. Speaker, in relation to Windalco, I will not say too much now, but the Minister had shared with me on the issues affecting the sanctions, and I'm so happy that those sanctions no longer looms large, but that this is an opportunity now for the company to use this respite to do what it said it would have done from 2014, which is to modernize itself to become a base location rather than a swing location, so it therefore has to become far more efficient by cutting the cost. I wanted to say also about CAP, the Clarendon Aluminum partnership with Jamalco, that I have noted, Minister, over the last 2 years, that the cost of production has risen dramatically, so that in 2016, when there was an operating, we are seeing losses since then, and for me it's attributed to the higher than normal cost of production. And I'm wondering if the problem that our partner Noble has in their own restructuring, if that is affecting their management of the plant. And I urge, and again this is where I can offer some assistance, proactivity on your part as they go through their issues for the government of Jamaica to assume greater responsibility to bring those costs down and to make CAP a profitable venture. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. I want to just touch briefly on the resettlement issue. The resettlement issue cries out for immediate attention. The ease at which citizens are displaced must be matched by ease of resettlement. It is not beyond us to find a solution to this vexed issue. And I want to remind the House of the leader of the opposition's position. He called for the establishment of a special regime to liberate mined-out bauxite lands for productive purposes, including agricultural production and housing. And that is going to be my task when I take over from you after the next time around. And Mr. Speaker, I'm so happy that the Prime Minister is back with us, because I have to say, Prime Minister, on the cockpit country, it has been many months since you addressed this Parliament and announced that the boundaries of the cockpit country were resolved. Since that time, we have not heard anything about the cockpit country. We have not seen the promulgation of a ban of mining in that area. We have not seen the delineation of the boundaries. And I have, pardon? No, Prime Minister. The urgency with which you dealt with it, it is our position that it appears to be public relations and not a serious intent to prevent mining from the cockpit country. I'm prepared to discuss further with you, but we are very concerned that to date, after a year, nothing much has happened. Mr. Speaker, I have 5 minutes to conclude. Mr. Speaker, the objective of my presentation has been threefold: to ensure that this administration and the ministers with responsibility for mining and energy return focus on the policy prescriptions that have been designed to grow the Jamaican economy, position our country on a path of sustainable development, and safeguard the interests of our people. Mr. Speaker, too many scandals and incidents of poor management emerged during the last financial year. These have set back much of the progress that were achieved. I wish to emphasize once again that consultation is key to the successful promulgation of policies that affect the lives and well-being of people. During our stewardship, our successes were achieved through consultation and positive interaction. And again, I call upon both ministers to use this National Energy Council as a model for the way that these important sectors can be developed to ensure greater levels of consensus building. Mr. Speaker, as a result of our performance, we did bequeath to this administration. It was sometimes acknowledged, sometimes it's not. So I have to remind what we bequeath to this administration: a clear vision for these critical sectors of the economy, a firm platform on which to build, a clear path to follow, and in general, an enduring legacy. Mr. Speaker, I close this presentation with a call for a renewed commitment to the implementation of policies consistent with the National Development Plan, Vision 2030. This plan seeks to make our country the place to live, to our families, and to do business. Inherent in this plan is the important message that this vision must be based on inclusiveness of all our people, our bright young people with their enthusiasm and aspiration, some people would say exuberance, our elders with their experience and wisdom, our women with their strength and resilience, our workers with their energy and skills, our professionals with their talent and knowledge, our business people with their capital and acumen, and all of us who love this beautiful country. Mr. Speaker, this is my 24th presentation in these sectoral debates. I continue to, I don't look it, yes, 24 years.
That's what the girl left us.
Continue to be grateful for the opportunity to serve my country and the people of East Kingston and Port Royal. Mr. Speaker, I'm also grateful for the almost 15 years of service in the cabinet of this land, making me one of the few in this parliament to have served that time in the cabinet. I think the opposition and the member from Northwest St. Catherine on this side and a few on that side. So, Mr. Speaker, in all of this, I am very proud of some of the achievements that we have done on behalf of the people. Every single policy was created with one aim: the growth and development of this great little place called Jamaica. At all times, I have fought for what was best for the people of Jamaica. And I did it in the words of my school motto, Agi Animo, do it with all thy might. Excelsior. So, Mr. Speaker, I am proud of the liberalization of the telecommunication sector. I am proud that Jamaica has moved from one of the countries with the lowest teledensity levels in the world to one of the highest today. I am proud that the Jamaican model of how to introduce competition in the telecom sector has been followed across the length and breadth of the Caribbean. I am proud that more and more Jamaicans have access to smart devices and the internet. I am proud that we had the vision and were brave enough to take the risk of establishing a universal service fund which has accumulated $14 billion and seen over 400 community access points, e-learning, and tablets in school. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of my role in liberalizing the motor vehicle industry so that access to a motor vehicle is no longer restricted to a few. I am proud that I helped to establish Jamaica as a leading Caribbean state for the use of renewable energy. I am proud that we have been able to achieve diversification with the introduction of LNG at a ceiling price of 12.89 US cents per kilowatt hour. I am proud of the pivotal role that I played in the development of Petrocarib, the Petrocarib Development Fund, and the debt buyback negotiations with Venezuela. I am proud of the reforms that I led to modernize our company's law and to promulgate modern legislation in intellectual property protection. I am proud to have implemented reforms and laws to protect our manufacturers, such as anti-dumping and subsidies and safeguard legislation, I am proud to have promulgated far-reaching consumer protection legislation and amendments of the Fair Competition Act. I am proud of the creation of the Spectrum Management Authority, eGov Jamaica Limited, e-learning, NESOL, JIPO, Consumer Affairs Commission, Energy Council, Victor Wind Farm, etc., etc., etc. I am proud of my pioneering role in the creation of a BPO industry and the creation of thousands of jobs in this sector. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I am proud of my role in getting GISCO to reopen Alpart in Jamaica. I am proud that at all times my first priority has always been protecting the people and safeguarding their interests. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I am proud of these achievements, and I'm so grateful that I was given the opportunity to achieve these for the people of this great nation. May God bless Jamaica and great health.
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it is obvious that he was totally confident of the generosity of the House Leader to extend him by 15 minutes because his speech lasted for 45 minutes. Now, that is not the norm. That's not the norm. So everyone ought to be reminded of that, both sides. Nonetheless, Mr. Speaker, I ask that the sectoral debate, be suspended to enable the Prime Minister to seek suspension of the standing orders to enable him to take the resolutions that he brought earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I now move for the suspension of standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just procedurally, I will speak on the motion, and if members of the opposition are so moved to speak, we would have their contribution, and then we will close and vote on the order. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be very efficient with time and not go into the put both together. We don't have to do them separately. Mr. Speaker, the zones of special operations, by all measures, is a success. What we have managed to achieve, just by way of statistic, and I'm not seeing the slide, but I'm going to start with Mount Salem. Look at Category 1 crimes committed in the 577 days prior to the declaration of Mount Salem being a zone of special operations. Mount Salem would have been declared now for 577 days. Category 1 crimes would be murder, shooting, aggravated assault, rape, robbery, break-in, and larceny. So just the table. In the 577 days before the zone was declared, there was a total of 17 murders, 29 shootings, 2 cases of rape, 3 cases of robbery. Since the declaration of the zone of special operation for the 577 days, 0 murders, 0 shootings, 1 aggravated assault, 2 cases of rape, 1 break-in. So it is clear, Mr. Speaker, that the zone of special operation is working very well. That is the map that you were seeing before was the number of crimes committed in the 577 days before declaration, and the map that you're seeing now is after. So that there's no question about the success of the strategy. And with the same data for Denham Town, if we could move to the table for Denham Town. In Denham Town, for the 532 days before the zone was declared, there were 31 murders, 44 shootings, 2 cases of aggravated assault, 7 cases of rape, 7 cases of robbery, 5 break-ins, and no case of larceny was reported. And after the zone was declared for the first 532 days, we saw where there were 12 murders, 10 shootings, 3 cases of aggravated assault, 9 cases of rape, 3 cases of robbery. Right, so that's the slide after, and you could go to the slide before. Or you want the... So this is the slide before. So the slide after is this one. Now, just an explanation. No, different slide. Now, you will recall that there was a drawdown, an early drawdown of presence in Denham Town when we were about to stand up the state of public emergency in North St. Catherine, and that resulted in a transitioning far earlier than we should have. And during that period of transition, there were at least 3 murders and 6 or so shootings that took place. Since then, we have learned that this is not a process that you can rush or premature. You have to make sure that you attain the markers for transitioning. So what I'm saying to the Parliament, Mr. Speaker, is that we have reached a point where we believe that we have perfected the operations of the zones of special operations, and that we are now ready to declare other communities zones of special operations. And in short order, announcements will be made about the declaration of other communities. You would have seen us engage in a strategy of training using the Jamaica National Service Corps to rapidly increase the manpower of the JDF. Some of those members will ultimately find their way through the recruitment process into the JCF. So we are using the JNSC as a mechanism to increase the manpower of the force so that we can stand up more of these zones of special operations. We have made budgetary allocations. The only challenge that we have now would be to manage these areas and at the same time manage the requests that are being made to keep presence in such as St. James and Westmoreland, Hanover, Augustown, and South St. Andrew. So we are working out the allocation so that we in no way deprive any area of the presence. So that is the only issue that has kind of prevented us from declaring zones earlier. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of National Security gave a very extensive presentation. I don't propose to go through much, but just to say, to remind the House as to what the situation is with murder and other serious crimes across Jamaica. In Kingston Central, year to date, we are 9. Last year, we would be 6, and this is the police division. In Kingston Eastern, we are now at 16. Last year, we were at 17. In Kingston Western, we are now at 16. Last year, we were at 28. So it's hard to see, so I'll read the numbers. In St. Andrews Central, we are now at 34. Last year, we were at 27. So that's an area that we have to pay close attention to. St. Andrews Central. That I believe would incorporate Augustown and those areas, Halfway Tree and so forth. Then St. Andrew North, we are now at 13 murders. Last year we were at 13 as well. St. Andrew South, last year this time we would have been at 60 murders. Now we are at 42. Again, this is an area to watch, that even though we are behind, the potential for volatility in that area is great. So we have to pay close attention to St. Andrew South. This is one of the areas that requires presence. In St. Catherine North, presently, 24 murders have been recorded. Last year, this time, they were at 51. I believe we can say that the state of public emergency in that area would have had an impact which has lasted till now. But again, it can easily be wiped away. St. Catherine South, 39 murders to date. We had 26 murders last year this time. So St. Catherine South is another area that we have to pay close attention to. St. James. Last year this time in St. James we had 26 murders. Now we have 45 murders in St. James. The truth is that the potential in that area is for violent crime. The potential is great because of the access to guns, the entrenchment of gangs, and then the opportunity to commit the crimes are there. So, Mr. Speaker, we are very concerned about St. James, that it requires us to rethink the strategies that we are presently employing. The Commissioner of Police told me just whilst he was in the House that they have increased their operational presence there. They're doing more operations now than they did under the state of emergency. They are finding more weapons now than they did under the state of public emergency. They are arresting more persons than they did under the state of public emergency. But the truth is, that the rate has gone up, not just, well, it is both going up, it is 73% up in murders, and let me just make sure, and it has gone up as well in shootings, 17% up in shootings. It's a matter of concern because, Mr. Speaker, the challenge that we're having, we're not having a crime problem within the context of a normally operating society, as it would be said in a free and democratic society. What we're having is a crime problem that has overtaken the institutions of the society. This is an abnormal situation. It is a situation where the gangs have become so entrenched that the culture that supports them, there is an ecosystem that provides the weapons provides the hiding, provides the transportation, launders the money. So the question, Mr. Speaker, is how does a state treat with that? I mean, the truth is that regular policing is not at the capacity to address a situation like this. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm not here trying to make a case. I'm just bringing the nation up to date as to where we are. The thinking is that once we see that there are these breakdown in the fabric, basically, of the social order in that area, it does require emergency measures. Given the current context of constitutional challenges, the government has to think very creatively and find new strategies to address. So we are exhausting as much as we can from an operational perspective. Sorry, what? No, because so the general thinking, and Mr. Speaker, forgive me for having this engaging conversation in Parliament this way, but I think it's useful to address some of these issues in this way. The public following could possibly gain an understanding. The challenge, Mr. Speaker, is that we face a situation akin to a nation in an internecine war. Internecine war, meaning that it's not outright war, but you have gangs operating almost as guerrillas, fighting each other, regardless of any legitimate authority exists. And the solution to that, whenever you have that, is to have a strategy of keeping the peace. So you have to keep the warring elements away from each other. And that is a strategy that has always been employed right across the world in peacekeeping. Basically, you need to have a force that is keeping the peace. Firstly is the peace. Then, no. So the keeping of the peace is absolutely important, Mr. Speaker, because proper policing cannot take place when you don't have the peace. Because without the peace, the witnesses don't come forward, so your justice system doesn't work. The communities lock up, information doesn't flow. Men are able to walk on the road with guns with impunity. But remember, what you have raised there is the challenge. Please. What you have raised is a sense of frustration that the average person feels, that the government should respond with force. But the existence of the problem is what creates this former strategy of extrajudicial means. In other words, the response to the problem has been to have the police act in an extrajudicial way. But that is not a solution to the problem. In other words, killing off the criminals and the bad men doesn't end criminals and bad men. They are just replaced. So the strategy has to be an investment in a long-term peacekeeping, whilst in a parallel way you're building up the police force to do the investigations, to do the forensic work, to track the money, and to protect your borders. All those things are being done. The piece that we have not yet figured out is how to do the peacekeeping. The social element is critical. But what we have also discovered is that doing the social component without the companion security component, sometimes it does not work. So you have to have a strategy of doing them together. So the element that the Parliament has to figure out is how do we get this kind of keeping happening, utilizing both the military and the police in a structured scheme that gives the military some police powers and is able to control movement, is able to do search and other forms of interdiction, interrogation, etc. We are in the process of developing the legislation. We have to be very careful with the legislation because in this environment where pronouncements are, are made as to what is constitutional outside of, the government trying to do its job of protecting the citizens. The job now is that much more difficult. So we are preparing the legislation. We are ensuring that it is done properly. But in the interim, I wish to highlight that the situation is still tenuous, and that though the police have increased their operations and they are being supported by the army, the situation is still a very difficult one. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few comments, I encourage the House to extend the zones of special operations in Denham Town and Mount Salem.
Mr. Speaker, I think everyone in this House accepts the need for the extension of the zones that has been requested by these resolutions that have been brought. The implicit in the comments by the Prime Minister is that there is need for a national consensus about this problem, which is without doubt one of the most serious problems that we face as a country. It's not a problem that has emerged in the past year or past 2 years. A high level of crime has been a persistent feature of our social reality, having the rate of murder having almost doubled every decade since independence. One question which has been in part addressed by the Prime Minister is a question of why, given the success of the ZOZO operations, have we not utilized it more? I say the Prime Minister has addressed it to some degree because he has indicated that it's in his thinking and in the thinking of the government an intention to provide, to institute some more zones of special operation. I understand that, and I would say there are some obvious candidates, you have read some. Westmoreland, for example, has one of the high rates of murders. You have again St. Andrew South, St. Andrew Central as critical areas, and St. Catherine and Clarendon, all of which are showing higher than the national norm. Now, we are unable, the part of the answer that the Prime Minister has given, not today but on previous occasions, for why they not this
this reticence, this reluctance to declare other zones of special operation has to do with the desire for the social intervention component and the manpower needs of instituting the zones. It would seem to me, however, that one of the things that we can usefully examine is the relative costs of the social intervention and the intensity. Not to say that we want to skimp on social interventions, but quite frankly, looking at this, and there's not a budget cost assigned in this report, which nevertheless is useful. But when I look at some of the activities, they don't seem to me to be high cost in the broad scheme of things. You know, we have Peace Day, the ZOZO fun run in Denham Town. There was summer camps for youth, all of which I am not gainsaying the value of these things. What I am in fact saying that for relatively low costs, we can get a tremendous improvement in the sense of community belonging, in the sense that society as a whole is paying attention, and in some of the agencies, in fact, just addressing some of these areas. For the future, just as an aside, if we could get some idea of the relative costs when you present subsequent ministry papers, it would allow us to make a more meaningful assessment of the relative costs of these operations. When the legislation, the ZOZO legislation, was presented, it was presented primarily as a security measure. And among the benefits was the ability to coordinate the military police operations by establishing a joint command. And I think it is also of value, given the general requirements of the high crime zones in which are of concern to all of us, that we have to have both the military, which is in this context has the role is primarily directed at suppression, but I would suggest that in terms of the scenario that we're outlining, what we need to do is to look at the investigative capabilities of the police force, the intelligence gathering capabilities of the security forces, but led by the in this instance, because all that we have learned in the past, including in the situation in St. James when we had the major cocaine centers of operation there, including in subsequent embedding of the scamming operation in St. James and elsewhere, what has been demonstrated is that you get a respite from the criminality, you get a respite from the gangs when you identify the criminals and are able to take them off the streets, not by extrajudicial killing, but by eviction, because it sends a demonstration effect that crime does not pay. There is a lot in what is needed that was spoken to by the Minister of National Security in his presentation earlier. And I am certain that there will be a full response when the from the opposition when the opposition spokesman on national security speaks. But it is this particular issue of how do we get the known criminals, and I say known because they're not unknown to the security forces. They have, in fact, in earlier commentary by the Commissioner of Police and others, in fact, at the end of the state of emergency, people are saying whatever the number was of these dangerous people are going to be released on the streets. What has happened in other jurisdictions is that you find the way to target the people who are known to be that and prepare the task forces, gather all the intelligence, cooperate with all your partners, and take the known criminals off the street, because that is what gives you the break that you are urging that we need if we're to get some measure of peace. This is not to say that there is no need for suppression. There are, but one of the things that an extension of the ZOZO, even the boundaries in St. James, since you have established a perimeter of law-abidingness, expand the boundaries into some areas so you expand the perimeter of law-abidingness, and alongside that take out the known criminals that are there. What I would say finally, Prime Minister, I know that there are those, some over there who have voiced it, that say, well, you know, governments are appointed to govern, and in effect there is no need for a consultation. In this matter, including in the matter of any additional legislation, such as the legislation that we have agreed to discuss, we meet at one meeting, and you have had one, but I know the Honorable Attorney General has been busy elsewhere, at home and abroad. But I want to urge again, let us seek a consensus, not just between us, but let us engage other stakeholders, not only in the understanding, not only so that there can be a fuller appreciation that they may not have as to the dimensions of the problem, but that the solutions that we seek can have the engagement of the widest possible number of citizens of the country in support of the measures that have to be. Because I think ultimately all our hopes and aspirations as a country hang on this issue, as also do all our hopes and aspirations hang on the preservation of our democratic rights and principles. We can get both, I believe, but to do that, we need to be assured as to the limits of tolerance in terms of any compromise on normally accepted rights, and that we are exhausting all the other tools available in the toolbox of legislation, of security force practice, and otherwise. So, Mr. Speaker, there's no objection. We support the extension of these zones of special operation. What we would ask for is that we can move the needle further so that we can find common ground in going forward to confront the criminals who threaten our future in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I just want, since the Prime Minister has not announced, today the areas to which he intends to extend the ZOZO, I wish just to make my comments before he announces those areas, so that the one I'm going to put can be put into consideration for possible involvement, if it is not already there. I spoke to it the first time you brought ZOZO here to Parliament. I supported it, but I mentioned that area in my constituency that has been overwhelmed. And your security minister, my colleague, MP from St. James, is aware of the devastation to the greater Cambridge community that has carried on for far too long now. One of the most notorious gangsters that was on the most wanted list is still not caught from that area. 2 others were taken out by the security forces. But the #1 man is still around the place, and his cohorts are still there. It is said that there are guns everywhere there, and we hear them firing at night. So it's not soldier and police firing the guns. But the truth of the matter is, Prime Minister, the area needs to have that intervention, because the social decay that has taken place over the years needs to be adjusted. We are doing what we can, but we do have that amount of collateral, so to speak, to really make things come back to normal. And we believe that, working with JSIF, I've spoken to your minister already, who is in charge of JSIF and the Social Investment Fund, have come to take a look, but we really need to have the ZOZO in that greater Cambridge area that takes in Retrieve, it takes in Bickerstead, it takes in Richmond Hill, Mount, and all these places are new roads, are places where they have been killing people still. And we really need to have the support of the ZOZO. So I hope it is on your next list when you announce it, but if it is not there, I would love you to consider it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member from St. James and the leader of the opposition for their contributions. I don't have much more to say other than to point out that we are about 8% below. We started the year at about 22%, Minister, 22% thereabouts. We're 8%. And it is going to be whittling down if we don't have greater interventions. I want to assure the country that the security forces are doing all that they can. The government is increasing the budget for security. We're doing all the high-level strategies that have been mentioned by the leader of the opposition, all the targeting. You know, we don't have specific legislation for a watch list to have specific persons, but that is something that has been put for consideration and probably should be developed. We have to figure out whether or not it can work within our Charter of Rights and everything else that we have in terms. But you know, one thing that I am committed as a Jamaican is to protect the rights of all citizens. So it is not an easy job to maneuver within the parameters that are set to address the issues. But one thing we have committed to as a government, and myself personally, is that our government must never be blemished by human rights abuses. So, and it is part of, it's what we have to do, as the Attorney General is putting words in my mouth here now, as a maturing democracy. It's part of the maturing of the democracy. It is. It is. So, Mr. Speaker, we are maturing as a democracy. 10 years ago, Mr. Speaker, 10 years ago, the leader of the opposition and who were in the House 10 years ago would recall that the great clamor was of police abuse, of extrajudicial killings. And we passed the Income Act, which is heavily criticized, but it is important in ensuring that the country understands the right to life. It's a very important, Indicom is a very important institution in ensuring the right to life. The other fundamental change that is taking place before our eyes is that the police by now would have recognized that they have to internalize the protection of the right to life and not depend on Indicom to enforce on them, but they internally have to put in place the systems and measures to protect life. So as we are transforming the institutions to reflect what we all would want to see and aspire to as a young democratic nation that is maturing, we also have to deal with the mayhem that is happening in our communities. The two things have to work hand in hand, and I just want to assure the nation that we are not taking our eyes off the challenge, and we're going to do everything that we can. We recognize that there has to be greater collaboration, and we stand ready to do that as a government. Mr. Speaker, without much more, I again thank members for the contribution and ask that we vote in favor of the extension.
The question that two motions as put by the Prime Minister be approved. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? As have it. Mr. Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today, so I invite you to adjourn this Honourable House until next week, Tuesday, 23rd, at 2 p.m. Mr. Speaker, I think it is fair to say that the format that we have applied to these sectoral debates, with the mixture of government business and other matters in the House with the sectoral debate, and the duration of time over which we will conduct these debates, will certainly help in accommodating those who come to listen and to participate in our proceedings. Today is an example of that. When we came here, there was not even standing room only, there was just no room, period. Today, as we have conclude very important matters, extensive matters, we find that we have accommodated our visitors very well. So we will continue with this format because it seems to be working quite nicely. Oh, I see. All right. But you know, because of the business we are in, we are inclined to talk a little and too long. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask that the House be adjourned until the 23rd at 2 p.m. It is my intention to put the resolution. May I advise members in the gallery, the House is about to adjourn. Ask that you stay in your seat, stand when you should until the mace go through the door. The House is now still in session. The order is, the motion is that the House be now adjourned until next week, Tuesday, the 23rd, at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? Ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned.